welcome to another episode of Planet Outlook. My guest today is the noted environmentalist Sumaira Abdulali from Bombay. She has been battling air noise, light pollution, as well as sand mining for many years now. So, while Delhi and surrounding areas gets all the attention on air pollution, Mumbai has been recently recording very severe levels. So, firstly, thank you, Sumera, for joining us on Planet Outlook. It's a real pleasure having you on this show. And I just wanted you to begin with the current situation in Mumbai.
Well, thank you for inviting me and Happy New Year to everyone and to you. The current situation in Mumbai, air pollution wise, has not been great because it's been in very high levels exceeding 300. And we live in hope in Mumbai that the sea breezes are going to blow away everything that we create, But sea breezes, while they're great, have a limited capacity also, given that there's no limit to how much pollution we are willing to create. And so we are given AQI numbers in Mumbai, and we keep talking about how we are not as bad as Delhi and that all this stubble is burning around Delhi. But what we don't realize is that AQI doesn't tell us the whole story, because AQI gives us limited figures at certain fixed spots in the city, which are supposed to represent the whole city. But that's not the way it works. If you live next to a site where someone is burning garbage, or even you yourself are burning garbage, you're subjected to extremely high levels of air pollution, which may not show up on the AQI because they are smaller dumps typically. Um, so we have never categorized in Mumbai every source of air pollution that we have. We take it for granted that vehicular pollution is a major contributor, and of course industrial pollution, and they are, but we don't have a catchword like Delhi does. It's the burning stubble. That if only the farmers would stop burning stubble, all our problems would be sorted out. No, we don't have that. So we have to look to ourselves, that are we burning garbage? Even in the city of Mumbai, I have had complaints of people burning garbage, and definitely in the outskirts, Bhiwandi, Thane, Panvel, even all over Raigad district, people just don't know what else to do because there are no garbage collection systems. And this garbage consists not only of biomass like stubble, which is kind of like stubble, but also of plastic. So I would say Delhi is surrounded by burning stubble, but Mumbai is surrounded by burning garbage and plastic, and we aren't quantifying it. So we need to first make up a list of the issues we need to tackle regarding air pollution. The recent report told us that the medical council report that came out told us that Maharashtra has the second highest deaths related to air pollution in the country, which is a very alarming, very serious statistic. And given that our AQI numbers don't reflect cause for that, it really makes us wonder how and why we are here. And I think each and every one of us whose health is affected also needs to take action to start documenting what it is that they're being affected by. And then we can, just like we did, for other campaigns like the noise pollution campaign, it's only when they start getting individual complaints of individual action which they can take on the ground that things are going to change. Talking of very large issues like let's solve air pollution and let's bring down this AQI number. Well, these are things that people feel disengaged from because they have no real actionable role that they can play.
Talking of burning garbage, recently you went around Mumbai and also the greater Mumbai area, and I've seen pictures of you with a meter and you're recording smoke levels and all. Tell us about that story a bit.
Well, I was very excited when I found that you could get this kind of a low cost meter when you could record it, because this is something I've been doing for decades on noise. And I know that you can record these things. And then I did some research online and, in various ways. And I found that various governments, including in the US and Europe, have actually stated that AQI levels cannot control localized sources of air pollution. They can't even decide or help you determine what they are, leave alone control them. And so they're actually working out methods to promote citizen science campaigns where you can get these meters and each one of us can kind of keep track of how much air pollution he's been exposed to in his daily life. So we know that we can buy air purifiers and keep ourselves shut up in a room, but do we know that if we take this particular route to work, we'll be exposed to more pollution or less pollution, and maybe change our habits a little bit because of that? It would be worthwhile if you think that this is a serious, health issue, and that maybe the money that you're spending on the meter would be spent on, healthcare later. Even COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, and air pollution definitely is a respiratory disease, but also has, like COVID, has so many other things that can happen as well. Burning plastic can give you cancer. So I felt I'd like to know for myself, what exactly are we talking about? We keep reading AQI figures and we don't know how to engage with those figures. So I got a meter. In fact, I got two meters of two different types. Both are handheld and portable. One gives me a better visual display and gives me immediate spot readings. The other one has a proper GPS attached to it, so it can track where I am and give me a more. So both are useful, and I use both separately and together to check how they compare with each other. And the results were very interesting because whichever meter I used, when I was near a source of air pollution like burning garbage, the levels went up at B1D to over 600 nanograms um, per cubic meter, because the size of the dump was so large. And I realized that the size of the dump in every reading had a direct correlation with the kind of readings. 2.5 PM 2.5 is the particulate size of the matter that is being released into the air. And this particular matter is so small that it can be inhaled deeply into our lungs, and it causes immediate and long-term damage to the lungs. So this is the particulate matter that we have to be most worried about. It can cause cancer, it can cause all kinds of things. And the norms, the standards say that you should not be exposed to more than 20 PM 2.5 over a 24-hour period. But if you live next to a place which is continuously emitting between, say, 200 and 600, it's very difficult to imagine that you're going to ever be exposed to only 20. And this is not AQI. This is for people who live in those areas.
Maharashtra and also Mumbai in general, we have one of the richest municipal bodies in the country. And this is not the first time. I know you have written to them countless times raising this issue. How have they reacted to this?
Well, their reactions are always very positive. They are going to do a lot of things. And I really look forward, because I believe that whether they're authorities or politicians or anybody, any person who lives here is exposed to air pollution. It's not one of those things you can escape. But maybe they're finding the issue very daunting themselves and they're not able to tackle it clearly, because in spite of so many years when they have really wanted to, they've said they wanted to, they've, come out with all kinds of plans, they have not been able to do them. So maybe what I'm saying is right, that this issue needs to be broken down into much smaller pieces, implementable pieces, and each one tackled. And therefore, I take it that the authorities are people too, and they want to safeguard their own health and their own children's health and their own, everything. So do that which you can, but the important thing is to begin. I think that's the most important thing. And it's up to people to tell them where we want them to begin, because that also informs. And again, talking of very large issues like handle the garbage dump at Deonar, and well, yes, of course, that's the end plan, that's the goal plan. But what are the steps leading up to doing that? It hasn't happened in the decades that we've been hearing that it's going to happen.
Also, Mumbai's air pollution seems to peak every January. Why is this so?
Well, partly it's to do with the weather patterns, because during the winter months, there's very little breeze, and earlier years it used to be fog, that the winter months always had a lot of fog. But now that fog has become contaminated with emissions, and it has become smog. So that same fog which exists in the form of smog because of the weather patterns. But also we have various activities that are more, I would say, in winter. For example, burning is more in winter because people want to keep warm. When you go to the outskirts of Mumbai, maybe Mumbai never gets that cold, but even then, I have seen fires even within Mumbai, people trying to keep warm. And what do they burn? They burn either biomass or plastic. And if you go outside Mumbai, again, it does get pretty cold in some of the surrounding areas, especially where it's hilly, and there's more burning there. Then there is a certain amount of crop burning as well, and garden waste burning. And of course, we also have Diwali, which precedes the winter months, just precedes. And after Diwali, that pollution has nowhere to go. So we have a multiple kinds of factors which kind of create air pollution. And I know it's always easier to say, but maybe industrial pollution is more, or vehicular pollution is more, or garbage burning is more, or crackers are more, or crackers is an issue which even the courts have taken up, whereas garbage burning. So I don't think that's the way to go. I think if you are bothered by a certain type of pollution, whatever it may be, then you should be complaining about that and making sure there is not only a mechanism to complain, which is accessible to everybody, but that action is taken for one small thing. If action is taken for each small thing, it's cumulative after all.
So earlier you talked about how AQI is sometimes misleading kind of thing. And all our pollution, air pollution talk is focused on outdoor air. But there are several reports which talked about how polluted our indoor air is.
Yes.
So your thoughts on that, in Mumbai especially? Yeah.
Formaldehyde is used to making certain types of wood composites. There are so many toxins in cleaning liquids and different kinds of things that we use at home. And we never think about it because we think they're cleaning our space. We don't realize that they, in some ways, may be cleaning, but in other ways, they are polluting our space and making us ill. I think it's becoming more and more well recognized that AQI definitely is not the only answer all across the world. And there's indoor pollution, there's outdoor pollution. We can measure both, we can take action provided we're aware. So there's a huge need for awareness as well. And of course, governments have a role not only in making policy which works, but in implementing the policy and in also creating awareness among people so that they realize that what they're doing should, there are other ways to do it. So I hope that governments, NGOs, people will come together and make sure that every type of air pollution, including indoor air pollution, is tackled.
Along with air pollution, you've been also running this long campaign on noise pollution. So let's hear a bit on that.
Well, when I started working on noise pollution almost 2 decades ago now, uh, people laughed at me because they said that, this is not an issue anywhere in the world. And in India, it is especially not an issue because Indians love noise. And you're a spoil sport and you're just a party Cooper and your all those things which I've heard, and also that the whole noise pollution campaign is targeting some communities, or it is against politicians in general, or it is against whatever. So it's all against. You're against music, you're against fun, you're against youth, you're against politicians, you're against this, you're against that. But the fact of the matter is that noise is again a very serious health issue. And when I say creating awareness among people, I think a very good place to start is when you're lucky, like I was, and get a very good court order. So it gives you some handle to begin with. But as a novice, somebody who had never been to court, knew no lawyers, and didn't know anything about the whole process practically, I had not realized that I will also be called upon to implement this court order by actually creating the awareness and getting people to complain and collating those complaints and making sure that a mechanism exists which works. And because I had no idea what to do, I made the mistake, or whatever it was, maybe not a mistake, of giving my number to a journalist and saying, ask people to call me with complaints. And they did. And I got, you know, a whole line of calls. And even today, I keep getting, and every day I get some call or the other on noise, even now, so many years later. But at that time, people would cry on the phone and they would tell me their stories, and they would tell me that they understood that there was nothing I would be able to actually do to help them because it was too difficult an issue. But at least I was not telling them that they were crazy because they were so sensitive to noise. And when I heard this story again and again and again, how each individual person thought he was the crazy one, I realized that this is something really worth doing. And creating awareness means creating awareness not just among ordinary people, because there are no ordinary people in a city like Mumbai. They're all either professionals. Many of them are the bureaucrats and politicians who thought that this is not an issue worth taking up, and who laughed at me. But they realized along the way, when they started getting more and more complaints from people, that yes, it is an issue and they themselves are being affected. In fact, after so many years of talking about it, last year, of course, it was the year of COVID, and that's one reason. But in the years previous to last year, several years before that, noise levels had been progressively coming down year after year in the festival season. And last year, with the help and cooperation of everybody, people whom I had thought could never be on my side, they were on my side, whether they were the Ganpati Mandals or they were the Eid Milad organizers or they were whoever they were, the politicians who held their Dasera rally online and showed the way, or who made the rules, or the police who enforced it. Across the country, there were calls to celebrate responsibly, but it happened only in Mumbai. And it happened
Let
in
me
Mumbai in spite of the fact that there were no strict rules in the same way, people cooperated.
let me ask you, in the 10 years that you've been part of this
20,
campaign, yeah, 20, yeah. So, what are the major environmental or health effects that you have documented
on noise?
on noise?
Well, it's the noise rules themselves are based on a World Health Organization report, and which said that there are certain levels of noise beyond which you should not be exposed to in various conditions, including when, if you're sick in a hospital, if you're old, in the day, in the night, if you're trying to learn something, all those. So these effects include sleep deprivation and everything that goes with that, which is a chronic thing anyway in India, because, you know, and they include, of course, hearing loss, but they also include mental health disturbances. They can bring on psychosis. I have seen people who have had psychotic fits, who have wanted to commit suicide because of the anxiety and stress and irritation of noise. It can also bring on heart disease, blood pressure. It's related to all those things. And recently, doctors have been saying that because noise is a vibration, it can even lead to cancer. So these are effects which we all know, that we have a very unhealthy city, but we don't correlate with pollution factors like air and noise pollution.
So, just want to come back to the air pollution part. So, is garbage burning happens because we do not have a proper segregation system of or a waste collection system. So, do you think Mumbai is kind of is progressing towards that? Is there a effort in Mumbai or surrounding Greater Mumbai areas to segregate garbage to reduce this burning?
There have been various efforts made by many people. The municipalities have made efforts. Various NGOs, locality managements, they have made efforts. Um, but the efforts are clearly not enough, because they're still giving us this quality of air. So when over decades you're making an effort, but the effort is not actually giving you a result. In fact, things are getting worse every year. Then I think perhaps that effort has not been sufficient. And maybe we need to step up that particular effort and make other types of efforts as well. And I think more and more involvement of people is key. It's not up to municipalities alone. They haven't been successful.
One of your Also, one of the other big campaigns of yours is also sand mining. and you had a lot of tough time basically battling illegal sand mining. And but sand is something which is like, I mean, it's ever present in every item we use, from this computer to our mobile phones. So some years back, I read this book, The World in a Grain, by this American Canadian journalist Vince, and that led to your campaign of sand mining. So tell us a bit about the campaign that you're running and why our beaches are disappearing and why there is a very serious threat.
Yeah, I'd like to just say that for me, I was attacked in 2004. Vince came to India in 2015 and wrote his first story. So it's actually the other way around. Vince came here and learned about sand mining here in India. So the sand mining campaign originates in India for the whole world and has become international. So I did not realize when I was attacked in 2004 on the beach in Kihim, where I grew up, that this would become an international issue. Because at that time, again, it was an issue where people would laugh. You know, they would say, well, you know, sand, the very definition sand is that it's so plentiful. When you want to show plenty, you talk about sand, as plentiful as grains of sand, and you don't think that this can ever be an issue. When I complained to the authorities, they said, Madam, go home and look after your children. Don't worry about this because the sea always brings in more sand. So you're just wasting your time and ours, basically. And then the next step from that was when people started saying, well, you know, I went to court after I was attacked, because when you're attacked, you have a choice to make, right? Either you give up because it's too scary, or you realize that no, actually, there's much more to this issue than anyone has realized, certainly than I have realized. So I started collecting data and I went to court. And I, you know, when I look back now, that court case has so little information because that information simply didn't exist. And then we got an order, a very good order from the Bombay High Court to say that sand mining should be banned, first in the coastal districts and then in the whole state of Maharashtra, until the Maharashtra government comes out with a sand mining policy. And at that time, the conversation changed. And I started hearing that you're against GDP growth, you're against development, because if you stop sand, then all growth stops. And that's when it really occurred to me that sand is part of just about everything. As you just said, you know, the buildings, the everything. And I presented it to the UN in 2012. And do you know, the UN said that coastal issues are some of the most important issues on our agenda. We don't have a single document or paper on sand mining. And at the same time, there was a French journalist who was making a film on sand mining, the first one. His name is Dennis Dalestrac, and he's really the pioneer in a way of making it international. He came to India, he documented it here. The film was released in 2013 in Paris, and the UN saw it. Even then, the UN did not have a document. The UN's first document was in 2014, which was 2019. They came out with their first report and said that, confirmed what Dennis had been saying, that sand is an internationally traded commodity, the second most extracted material in the world after water. They took on board a lot of the data that we had collected in India into their report. And they also, very interestingly, accepted something I have been saying for a long time, that this issue of garbage, what we just talked about, garbage is the raw material which can substitute sand. And the UN were the first to kind of corroborate that and agree with it and put it in their report when they said that India has the capacity to lead the world in this. Because not only is it the country which extracts the second highest quantity of sand in the world, more than the whole West has extracted in the whole 20th century, we have extracted in the last decade alone. So not only is this a fact, but that we have huge stockpiles of garbage. And I worked with a professor of IIT Bombay, who in our PIL in 2010 gave the first report on recycling garbage and recycling materials into sand. In those days when recycling was not a commonly understood idea. And now in 2019, he's also told me and written a paper that we can use the legacy waste that we have in our garbage and recycle it to produce 100% of the sand requirements of India into alternate aggregates, which is such a great project. You know, we can lead the world in doing it. The UN supports it. I hope the government of India will support it, not just in terms of written policy, which to some extent they have done now, because they've said that construction and demolition waste can be, but actually using plastic for building roads, which has been done experimentally, for using other materials, other garbage. I would love to grow up and live in a time when I can look back and say, I live in a house which is made of something which used to be called garbage. And I've saved my beaches and my creeks and my rivers at the same time.
So let me ask you, what are the visible impacts that you have noticed on the negative impacts of sand mining for the last 2 decades that you have?
Well, the first and most visible, of course, is that you immediately start losing land and you start losing the beach itself. So on sandy beaches, you now have rocky beaches. You can see where trees have fallen down, where the level of land has dropped. So that's right there, you know, it's in your face. And of course, when you lose land, you lose a whole lot of species along with that land, because sand can be either in the marine area, in the terrestrial area, or it can be in the intertidal area. And these are very important areas which kind of work together to give you a whole ecosystem, whether they're migratory birds or they're fish or they're crabs or they're land animals. But sand also has other effects, like, for example, when you take away the buffer between the sea and the land, you have that water, that salt water, which enters your groundwater table, and it creates salinity in areas which may already be water stressed. It takes away the ability of farming in those areas and creates worse, you know, water shortages and all that. So there's the water angle. Then, of course, there's the angle of losing farmland, losing fisheries, losing migratory birds, and all that. And also, the most interesting part is that we are taking away sand to build urban cities. Most cities or many cities are either on the sea or on a river. And you're using it to build the cities and taking away the buffer. We talk of mangroves being the buffer between the land and the sea and sea level rise. But mangroves also grow in a medium. And that medium is of, you know, it's clay or sand. But in some way or the other, when you take away sand, you're interfering with that too. And so it's kind of ironic, I think. And then you're
I
building,
also,
you know, buffers
yeah.
to the sea, which are again concrete, which are again made of sand.
I also see a link now between all your campaigns, from the air to the sand mining to garbage. So, for the benefit of our viewers, if you can just say, connect this in a little comprehensive, because I can clearly, in our conversation for the last 20 minutes, clearly see this pattern emerging, that how all the three campaigns are connected.
All things are connected in this world, you know. We just like to disconnect ourselves and compartmentalize. But actually, I mean, I just touched even briefly on migratory birds, which has a whole different, you know, so everything is connected. But for me, what has been most important is to realize that we are all part of an ecosystem. And whatever you touch, you have to stop yourself, that I will not go into the next area, which is this, because it's too much for one person to handle or one group to handle. And this I will leave for another group or another entity. But ultimately, these things and the systems to change them or to address them are also the same. And I think that's even more interesting, because it finally comes down to this, that there's no data on anything. If you take up a new issue, there will never be data. And you have to start with generating the data yourself, even experimentally, even if it's not perfect, even if an academic will find fault with it, it's there, it's data. Like my air pollution data, it may not be suitable to, you know, write a very long thesis on, but certainly it points to the fact that yes, we have air pollution from burning garbage. Or now my noise pollution data, which the courts have used and said, yes, we have a problem with noise pollution. So the systems are the same. You have to collect data, you have to create awareness. And when I say awareness, I mean awareness of people, of professionals from every field, whether they're lawyers, whether they're admin, whether they are government officers, whether they are politicians, all have to be aware that here's an issue. And then you have to take that issue and make it in some way implementable. So this is the way. And these issues are all connected, as you just said, whether it's noise or air or sand or garbage or anything, or for that matter, mangroves or birds or animals.
But I want to end today with another aspect of pollution, which is even less talked about, and which is light pollution, which you have kind of also touched upon in your life. Like, so light pollution affects insects, light pollution affects the turtle migration on the beaches, the migration of birds, as you have said. So tell us a bit on the light pollution as well.
Well, light pollution affects people as well. So, of course, I mean, yes, all of these things affect the larger world. But I think when you're talking to people and saying do something, you have to talk to people and tell them how their sleep patterns are being affected, just like they were by noise. And now, just as they have stopped laughing at the whole noise campaign, maybe they will realize that the light campaign is important too. So I measured light pollution again in some parts of Mumbai where there were complaints, where there were these stadiums and, with very high floodlights actually pointing to the road. They can cause road accidents. They can, people in Mumbai have forgotten what the night sky looks like with stars and moon. But I measured the light, and I found that actually our street lighting policy is pretty good, and I had no complaints to make there. So I see that it has been thought about and it has been implemented. The problem has been that just like noise, there is no kind of regulation on individual light. So we use any light of any voltage that we like in our compounds, in our gardens, in our windows, on shop corners, or in stadiums, open grounds, and we don't have shades. They are of the worst color of light to use is the blue white light, because it disturbs you the most. But those are the lights we use, and they disrupt traffic. In fact, just yesterday I was driving home and I saw the lights which are being placed on the coastal road side, and they are straight in the eyes of oncoming traffic. And I thought, well, the road lights, and I took a picture of both the road lights, the street lights, which are excellent, and these coastal road lights, which were terrible. And they are both on two sides of the road, and they're such a dramatic contrast. So we need a
Yeah.
policy, not just for formal lighting like street lights, but for informal lighting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this information, for your wisdom. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you around here on Planet Outlook for another topic, maybe.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for interviewing me.